So our next presenter, as we've heard his voice, is here with us. The person of James Ngumo is a senior research scientist and a certified knowledge manager. But we are very happy because he has skills in data analytics and health informatics. He currently works for Kenya Medical Research Institute and has over 20 years work experience in conducting research in health strengthens, which includes systematic reviews, knowledge management, knowledge translation, training, capacity building for human resource in health. In fact, he has published widely in peer-reviewed journals. I'm also happy to tell you that he's a blogger and a conference speaker. So we are going to enjoy his presentation. James was very instrumental in establishing an optimization of Kero's knowledge management office in 2018. In fact, there's a whole lot about Dr. James that if I want to proceed, time will not even allow me. James, if you can't hear me and you can take over.
Thank you so much for that introduction.
We are happy to have you. Yes.
Thank you. And we're going to have fun for the next 1 hour. And thank you so much to my colleague. We work in the same office, same institution. Dr. I want to share my screen, and we are going to go through that. Okay, so that is my screen for you. And welcome to part 2 of this session. Now, I missed some parts in the morning. I actually joined halfway, almost towards halfway the meeting today, when Lillian was presenting. So allow me to make an assumption. And this is the assumption that I'm talking to experts or people who have really conducted at least one systematic review. And I'm also talking to people or colleagues who are online who have not done any. So I'm going to balance the two. Secondly, I will try and, where possible, I will define the concepts without the definitions of some of the concepts without displaying on the screen. I will also switch between the PowerPoint and the some of the tools. I will introduce you to some of the tools that we are going to use or you will be using throughout. Number 3. Let me increase that volume. Thank you. Number 3, I want to also make a suggestion. Now that we have tools, now some of the Dr. Lillian Mayeka has introduced broadly what is systematic reviews, the forms, the types, why we should use, where we can use systematic reviews. So she has already laid the foundation as an introduction. Chair, I am going to pick it up from there, where she has now laid the introduction, and I want to go to the next part. So for the next few hours, let us critically go to the step 2, which is looking at critically appraising research literature for inclusion into systematic reviews. At the end of this session, all of us together, I'm also going to learn from you. I'm also going to learn from you that all of us together, we are going to get knowledge in 3 broad areas of systematic review process. Number 1, what are the common research designs? Because somehow that is where it starts. we should be able to critically appraise research publication in each individual and create a critical understanding. And then be able to identify study biasness in the
Hi, Carrie. Sorry, I just had to mute all participants, so please unmute yourself and speak.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Okay, so I was saying that as we set the ground, we are going to have three common things. Study designs. What are the common research study designs? Can we appraise research publications? And are we able to identify study biasness in publication? As a way of introduction, the previous speaker really mentioned that systematic reviews initially came or gained popularity when it came to appraising clinical trials and public health outcomes. But now that has really been expanded to include social sciences, clinical sciences, public health, and now health economics. So it is being identified as a growing discipline. And therefore, the new group that we're introducing are those groups that are doing qualitative research. I will try and mention a few techniques for qualitative research. But here we go. I also want to say this, Chair, that probably some of the participants here have already started identifying topics of interest. They already have something that they would like to do, maybe as an individual, maybe as teams. You've already identified areas or topics of interest, and you want to go back and look at what has been done before. We call that the state of knowledge. So what is the state of knowledge regarding, say, ACT uptake in East Africa? What the team will be looking for is what is known and what are some of the suggested gaps that would warrant research. So the topics are of interest to know what is known and topics of research. And number two, I want to assume, Chair, that participants are aware of how to create a research question that now goes into systematic review. The previous speaker, she mentioned about PICO as one of the areas, which is good. There is also SPIDER as another area of possible research elements. Your question should contain that. And SPIDER is more for qualitative scientists. And then we have ECOST. That is more for teams that are looking for policy, to do systematic research in policy to research engagement. So there are three of them: there's PICO, there's SPIDER, and there's CUSTO. All right, I will put them in the chat for you. Once you know how to frame the questions, that is the beginning of good, what do you call this? Quality research. Once you know how to validate the question. Colleagues, more often than not, a lot of us spend a lot of time on that area of research question, identifying exactly what we want to do. I always, one of the things I learned from my colleagues from Makerere University, and one of them will be your speaker on Thursday, is Dr. Moses Akron, sorry for the mispronunciation, who taught us of the one Chinese husband who had 5 wives. And once you start asking the why this, but why this, you start developing questions, and then you put them or you frame them using either the PCOST or the PICO or the spider or the COST, any of those three, depending of the area of research. Allow me to repeat that. The PICO or PICOST is for teams that are looking at clinical care, clinical management. The spider is for teams that are looking at qualitative studies. And the COST are for those teams that are looking for policy to research agenda or policy analysis. That's what is also called policy analysis. We'll come back to that later. So our first topic or subtopic right now are the study designs. If you were in a physical class, I would have simply given you a quiz and asked you to state as many study designs as possible. And some of you will be very smart because I know you Google them or ask AI for that aspect. But let us keep it simple. I love this hierarchy that is shown on your screen. I like it because, number one, the author has listed, in a way, all the types of study designs that are used. There is, just above the cohort studies, there is something that has missed there, which is called cross-sectional studies. There is one that is missing there. But I love this because it shows you in a triangle. And I want all of us to focus on that triangle. At the bottom of the triangle, we have individual case reports. Individual case reports. These are more like stories of change, stories of innovations, which are written and published. They could be success stories or they could be stories of failures. Those are usually at the bottom. Please underline the word individual because that is what is making a difference. We go next to case series. It could be a unique intervention that was happening, and therefore it was a pilot. That became a case study. So it is built along an institution or a collective group of people. Usually, even the way they have been sampled is different. Case studies. Then we have case control studies, we have the cohort, and then we have the cross-sectional. All that has one unique thing that is common through all of them. They are all observational studies. They are taken at one point in time. Observational studies. The next layer is the experimental studies. Under that classification of experimental studies, we have randomized controlled trials, RCTs, and we have non-randomized controlled trials, NRCTs. Some books will call them experimental studies, others will call them non-experimental studies. And also, this is where clinical trials used to fall in majorly, in the randomized controlled trial. In these are experimental studies in which the research scientist has control of very many parameters. The second thing is that their level of methodology is, the precision is very high. The precision is very high. And finally, they are time-bound, means that they are going into the future. Observational studies are looking at currently, now, at this point, and going backwards. But experimental, those are longitudinal studies, meaning that they are going into the future. So they are usually very expensive, but the level of evidence is actually very, very strong because of the rigorous control aspects that have been put in place. At the top there, once you have all these studies, what we have right at the top there are systematic reviews. And within systematic reviews, there's meta-analysis. The highest level is meta-analysis. Now, you can see that when you're doing a meta-analysis or critical or systematic review, you have a critical mindset. And you're using very strong and established methodologies to establish the level of evidence and why it is behaving the way it is behaving. Meta-analysis. So it's critical reading. Chair, we usually make fun at master's level that most of us don't like doing critical reading. But when you're doing your systematic reviews, you have to critically review the literature. And you ask yourself a number of questions like the why, the how, the what. What is the author saying? The why are they saying? So it is critical because you are looking at the current view vis-a-vis what will be the alternative view. So that is critical. Now, look at the strength of evidence. Individual case studies are largely opinion-based. They are focused on a small element. And you need a lot of those to be able to generalize. You need to do a lot of individual case studies or case series to be able to at least generalize that to a population or a time period. That is why the triangle at the base is very wide, very, very wide. And then it moves up, and it means the shape of the triangle will tell you that the number of publication goes minimizing. So when you're doing a systematic reviews, you do not need as many publications as those ones that you're doing at the case series. All right? Because of their ability to be replicated and validated. So the level of advice moves from relatively weak all the way to very strong. I also want to say that also the level of biasness, and we are going to talk about it, also moves the same direction from very high biasness at the bottom to very limited biasness at the top. They are very limited because they can be controlled when you're doing the critical meta-analysis. So I take that point and I wish to, that was my source. And then allow me, now that we have known the different types of studies and the three categories in which they fall into, we have learned about the strength of evidence and how it moves up the ladder from relatively weak to very, very strong. We have also said biasness moves also from relatively high biasness, which is at the bottom, to very strong. Chair, I pose the question to my participants. Where would you place opinion polls? Opinion articles, commentary articles. Where would you pose them? Chair, I also want to ask my participants online is that where would you pose some systematic reviews? For example, you go in to the Cochrane database and you realize the topic that you're doing is very, very high. Very good. They are coming in fast and furious. So you find that some people have done systematic reviews 5, 10 years ago. Where would you place those old systematic reviews? Very good. I like that. That opinion polls are individual case reports. This is very true. Opinion polls are individual case reports. That is very true because they are opinions. They cannot be generalized. And even if you're an expert in, say you're an expert in health economics, and you realize that a certain healthcare pattern is working, that remains an expert or an individual opinion until we are able to see the methodology that you have worked on, and then we see how we can replicate it and produce to see whether we can get those results. So opinion polls are there. they belong to individual case study. Do we include them in the systematic reviews? The answer is no. We don't include them in the systematic reviews, but we can include them when we are formulating the research question. That is where they come in, when we are formulating the research question, because they will be able to guide us and make us focus on certain areas or on the topic, specific aspect of that topic that we are interested in. Thank you so much. Where would you place, the question is, a systematic review that was done 10 years ago, would you still use it in this meta, in the, would you use it for the systematic reviews? You looked at universal health coverage, UHC, and you realize there's a lot of literature on UHC. For example, UHC and WASH, the water, sanitation, and hygiene. Where would you place a study that was a systematic review that was done 10 years ago? As you think about that, the most important to ask, the question you need to ask yourself, what did the authors find? Which population were they interested in? I came to learn that you can actually do a UHC and a WASH program for dispensaries. Wow. I didn't know that quite a number of, in East Africa, quite a number of health centers do not have safe, clean drinking water. So what you do is that while us, I like that what somebody has said in the chat room, is to build on it and get, get new findings. The aspect about it is that then you ask yourself, now that you have read the universal health coverage, UHC, and WASH that was in the community, you'll ask yourself, what new areas do I want to explore? What new areas? Chair, allow me to confuse the participants. Allow me to confuse the participants. You can use let me do it this way. When you are looking at the old systematic review, please remember your context. If you're intending to publish for general reading, general publication, it will be then useful to ask yourself, what is the new area that I am going to bring? What new thing? So for example, I'm looking at universal health coverage and the water, sanitation, and hygiene in rural dispensaries and health centers. And your focus is only clean water supply, because you believe that with that, then infection controls at the hospital-acquired infections will be minimized. All right? No, that is something new. That is something new, because all along, most of the studies in WASH tends to concentrate on sanitation. They also tend to concentrate on community, that is ending open defecation in the communities. They tend to concentrate on provision of clean, safe water at household level. Rarely do we find health facilities, somebody doing a WASH. So now it becomes what is new in this study is the fact that we are introducing a new concept into it, which is now health facilities. And that is our new population. So that is important to let the general viewers see it. Number two, if you are writing for academia, for the universities, let me call them academia, or for scholarly work, it is important to bring out, on top of the new knowledge, it is important to bring out the methodology issues. The strength is on the methodology. As much as you'll be looking at the outcome, but the methodology is critical. For example, you have 10 studies on wash. All right. If you have 10 studies, let me take the water sector. And you have supply studies that have been done in supplies. Okay, let me take the water sector, and you're looking at this reliability and the supply of clean water. You will find that 6 or maybe 4 out of 10 studies that you have identified, they used the research participatory designs. These research participatory design, which are largely subjective, which are largely qualitative. Sorry about that. They are largely qualitative in nature. And then you have 2 that are quantitative in nature, and you have a case study. As a good student, the first thing you'd identify to your supervisors as part of your academic discourse is to take note of the different types of study designs that have been used, the different types of population. And then you generalize that and say, given that we are getting different study designs, it will be useful to to keep bringing in more studies to see whether there is some form of consistency. So as a student, as a scholar, or for your academia, you will argue strongly on the, okay, I've seen that. You'll argue strongly on the population. You'll argue strongly on the study designs. You will argue strongly, probably on the statistical methods. I'm being collected here by one, something that is on the chart. Some of us are from social science, got lost in the terming opinion polls as individual case reports. They employ rigorous and scientific methods in selecting participants so they can be generalized. They also inform a lot of policy change. Kindly clarify. Well, thank you so much. Opinion polls or poll settings and opinion polls have actually been studied as rapid surveys. They're just rapid surveys. However, the key word there is the opinion. The key word there, forming opinion. Now, I would ask, if I go back and take that opinion poll, for example, let's do an opinion poll of how popular the linguistics. Okay, let me look at. Sorry, I have so much public health background, but I'll go back into the environment. And when I'm looking at the environmental studies, I am particularly interested in the growing of particular indigenous tree as a way of controlling desertification and climate change. When we grow indigenous tree versus the imported fast-growing trees, which ones are more acceptable for farmers as part of mixing, encouraging reforestation? You can quickly do an opinion poll among a set of farmers, and that will give you a quick feel of the feelings or the discussion. But you'll need to go deeper and set out or compare what is coming out from other areas. Would it be the same based on the various geographical location? What is the education status of those farmers, the acceptability? So they are kind of, the individual polls are quick and rapid.
Carrie, sorry to interrupt. Please, I just wanted you to know that your slide is not moving. It's still the hierarchy of
Yes.
study designs. Okay.
Thank you so much. It is. I'm the one who has put it there because after this we go to. Thank you for that.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. So Somebody is asking, I need more explanation on cohort studies. Between case studies and case control studies. Now, cohort studies is you can decide to take, for example, the fishermen in Lake Victoria. Sorry, let me use the East African example. The fishermen in Lake Victoria that covers Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya. And your cohort will be those fishermen or men having sex with men. MSN, men having sex with men. And you do a general study on them. That becomes your cohort study because you're interested in that population of study. In the case control is probably in the education sector, you would want to give up an exam. The first set of exam is one for recall, purely a recall. And another set of exam, you give it to another school, but same set of students who becomes your case study. And you give them a problem, an exam that first they will have to recall, but they have to solve the problem. Because you have discovered you want to do a new pedagogy. So is this pedagogy of problem solving a better one than the traditional recall for these students? And therefore you set the same exams, but one you make it a problem kind of exam solving, and the other one you make it purely a recall. And you see how the two students will perform. Please remember, when you are doing a case control, is that you have to state all your assumptions, and the field of experiment should be the same. So if you are looking at secondary school students, it should be secondary school students. So that is the difference between a cohort and a case control studies. Is one as simple as it moves in. Remember, cohort are very instrumental in this day and age when you be looking at the behaviors of particular groups. Cohort studies are very, very important. I take the last one. Yes, the session presentation is already sent to the hosts. They will share it when they are ready. And let me take, what is the difference between randomized control trial and non-randomized control trial? In the non-randomized control trial, remember we said these are longitudinal studies. They go into the future. The distinction is in the random control trials, the researchers are blinded of the intervention. They are blinded. And it is until they have done the research, they have got the data and analyzed, then do they now reveal the intervention. This is done so as to ensure that the researchers do not have influence on who gets what. So it's purely random. You'll put these guys on placebo, you'll put this one on the actual intervention. So that is the difference. In the non-randomized control trial, the researcher has more or less the influence to determine who goes where. Just by looking and listening to your case, then I can decide you go to the arm that is going to receive intervention, while this other one will go to the arm that is not receiving intervention. So those are the quick difference between random control and non-randomized. It's the position of the research team. All right. Now, the difference between a case control and RCT. Really, a case control is a one-time event, an observational study. And you have those two arms, like the one I gave, for example, the education sector, where you're trying two types of pedagogy by giving an exam, one for recall and another group, a case solving. And you want to see that difference. That's really a case control study. The random control trials, in what do you call it? In random control trial, this is a future longitudinal study. That's already the first difference. Going into the future, you must follow your subjects into the future. And the second thing is that you have no control. As a researcher or as a team, you have nobody. You have no control, or you even don't know who is getting the intervention or who is not getting the intervention. That you are blinded, and therefore you get results, and it will only be revealed to you at the end of the study. Let me take the last question here. In conducting systematic reviews, what is the gold standard in terms of study designs to be included in many of the studies? Well, when this started, clinical trials or random control trials were the best. Systematic reviews originally started with clinical trials, drug trials, and that is why they really emphasized on the random control. Then they came down to case control. But over the last 10, 15 years, there has been so much information from the qualitative scientists, the social scientists, the environmentalists. What about those who are not in the medicine? Can they still do it? The answer is yes. So there is no gold standard. The technique that we are going to introduce to you right now, you are going to see that it varies from one aspect to another. I'll be coming back to your Q&A, but let me go back to my slide. Allow me to go back to this slide as a way of introducing appraising research publication. The word you see there is the keyword quality. This evidence is trusted. This evidence is valid. Quality. That we are sure that even if 2-3 people conduct the same systematic review using the same studies, or the outcome or the description of all this, once we do a systematic review, even if we go and repeat another experiment, the first experiment was done in Kenya, the second experiment was done in Angola, the third experiment was done, say, in DRC Congo, there will be no change. It will still yield the same. That means the synthesis, the findings of that synthesis are of high quality, and they are generalizable, and they can be replicated, and they will still give the same. All right. So the statement there that I'm borrowing from Magrutte, Zane, Kevin, and Chang is that the validity of a systematic review ultimately depends on the scientific method of the retrieved studies and the reporting of data. The emphasis is validity, and that is critical, so that you're going to see very soon. So what is all this validity? Valid. I go to my next slide. All right. So the first thing when I talk about validity, the first thing is that first word, systematically. So when you are reading through, there's a systematic way of extracting the information from each paper. And then you judge the reliability of each paper. Systematically means there's a method. Reliability looks at more or less the income. Not the income, but the outcomes that the previous speaker talked about, and seeing how reliable those techniques, and then looking at how reliable those results or those outcomes have been generated. Systematically, reliability. Now, the other part is the relevance and worthiness of the paper. We are going to see there's a tool to judge, saying that this tool is good, this tool is not good. This paper is good, it's a very strong paper. This tool, or rather this paper, is a very weak paper. So how do you get all that? We are going to learn that in a few, just in a few. We come to the next part, which is data abstraction. Now, colleagues, remember when we started this, we said the first important thing to have at the back of your mind is the question. What is the gap? What is the question that you're looking at? Once you have done the question, Lillian talked about, and by the way, there are elements to be included in the question. The previous speaker talked about PCOST. Now we have introduced SPIDER and COOST. After you have identified the critical question or the issue that you need to find out the state of knowledge, the next thing is that you should have very clear inclusion and exclusion criteria. Inclusion, exclusion criteria. What studies are you going to include? What studies are you not going to include? So that now when you start downloading the papers, that is already taken care of. It was not part of this, but I decided that it is good to mention those two so that I bring you to the next part, which is the first part, which is the Prisma. When you're doing data abstraction, it all starts with the Prisma. Do I have my Prisma here with me? Let me see whether I can get my Prisma. Prisma, please show. Somebody, can you confirm that you can see my word?
No, I saw the slide has been showed.
Okay.
No, you have to reshare the whole screen.
Let me share the whole screen. Okay. Thank you for that. And now, can you see my Prisma?
Yes.
Can you see? Very good. Thank you. Our colleagues, here is the Prisma. It is adopted. It's a good technique, but this is a good technique that has been adopted to help us understand or to help us to get the papers. For our case, we have got it from this Moha. And the good thing about the Prisma is that it is a systematic step by step. Remember we talked about systematic? So here is your first tool. Your first tool is this flow chart. So now that assume that you have your questions and you go through the database, PubMed, you go through all other journals, journals of physics, journals of chemistry. When you go through that, the first step in the Prisma has 5 steps. It starts with the identification. Step 2 is the screening. Step 3, once you screen, you do the eligibility test or assessment, which is number 3, and number 4, the studies that are now included. You can use this for qualitative and quantitative studies. So number 1, identification. So you do your searches and you're probably going to get 40 or you get 50 articles. Once you use Google search, WHO, or Journal of Health Education, Journal of Engineering, probably the topic that you have is going to come, will give you about 50 articles. There are some theses that have not been documented or conference reports. The books of abstracts for some of the conferences, you will realize that they have not been published, but they are very useful because they have used scientific methods. And you're likely to get 120 abstracts from conferences, conference papers that have not been peer reviewed. So the first set has been peer reviewed. The 50 have been peer reviewed, that's why they're publishing peer review articles. These are additional records through other sources, and they have used scientific methods, but they have not really gone through heavy peer reviewed. And this includes things like conference abstracts. You check on the two and you realize that you have 170 articles for you to do your systematic review. 172. You have checked, you have seen that James does not appear 3 times. Ebenezer doesn't appear 5 times. So you remove all the duplicates. I must say this, that it is possible for an author to publish in 2 or 3 journals. But when you look through those papers, the only thing that changed was the title, the journal title, but the rest of the literature is the same. So that is what we are identifying as duplicates. Duplicates is where we have the same author published in different journals, but the study subjects, the study issues are the same. So you remove them and you realize now you have 70 records. All right? And you screen those records and you realize that after screening, you will add a new criteria such that I just want records that were done in the last 10 years. So from these 70, we are going to introduce other new aspects such that you only want records that were done in the last 10 years. You only want articles that have been done in sub-Saharan Africa. So you exclude probably 50. And it is good at the bottom there to say excluded. These are the reasons. I'm excluding them. Exclude. They are not from Africa. All right. So you have excluded those that are not from Africa. And that becomes your reason. It is good to tell us why you have excluded. And now you are left with 20. All right. But in those 20, you can realize that you can actually, again, you can exclude five more. Because you realize that they're probably their opinion polls. They are good, yes, nobody's disputing them. But those are just opinion polls. You have removed the 5. So you give the reason of why you have excluded. And therefore, for your study, you're going to look at these 15. Now that you've excluded 5, and then you look for the full paper, and then you get 15. Therefore, qualitative, quantitative. For the meta-analysis, you do not do meta-analysis on qualitative data. You do it on quantitative data. So meta-analysis is only for those 15. So you see, we have come from 117, and we have systematically dropped them to just about 15 that we are going to do our systematic review. We have used the 4 steps of PRISMA. We have identified, we have screened, we have checked for eligibility based on our criteria, and we have further excluded some until we are left with our 5. That is the systematic way of identifying which studies to be included. Once we have included, we go to the next part, which is data abstraction. Now, I have shared a very comprehensive spreadsheet of your data abstraction. This worksheet will allow you to now, from those 15, you are now going to critically extract information. And they start with a very small thing. They start with your name. This could be your name. And then you give yourself the study ID, assuming you are 3 or 4 of you. But it starts there. The citation. What is the reference citation? So which is that journal? What is the study author's details? What is the publication type? Are there other cross reference? That is just an introduction. We have this ID. That ID is what will be used to be brought here. And we are going to look at the interventions. What did the authors go to do as an intervention? Some of them will have disease targeted, but it is not a must. It is not a must to have disease targeted. Study design is very important. Who are the participants? All right. Were you looking at the schools, or were you looking at the pupils of certain age, or the pupils who are age 12 and 13, or year 8? So it's very important to know who the participants were in the publication. What were they looking at? Is it a new teaching and a new pedagogy? You'll go ahead and look at the methodology. Again, the study ID the informed consent, whether it was obtained or not, and the approval. Please take note of the unit of analysis. The previous speaker talked about outcomes. Now, what did they find out? In qualitative, you not need, you may have the difficulties in getting the disease of the others. But were they looking at an implementation, intervention, an intervention that seems to work? We need to describe that if it is the one that was working and where it worked. The coping, these are the various outcomes. Was it a coping mechanism? It is not a must that you fill each of these articles, but this is a broad term. Allow me to skip the qualitative risk bias for now, because we are going to meet it in a more organized manner towards the end of this presentation. Chair, how many more minutes do I have?
I think some few minutes remaining.
Okay.
Okay.
This is the last part, which
Okay.
is the type of biasness in publications.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you so much. When we talk about study biasness, is sometimes the authors in the papers that you have, they want to report good things, but they want to hide things that don't work.
I don't know if we can go back to presentation mode.
Oh, right. Thank you. Okay. Oh, right. So the study biasness, there are times when authors in various publications just want to report positive results. Also, it's the fatigueness with us who are conducting systematic reviews, that when I'm doing systematic reviews, I want to use WHO I want to use WHO database, or I want to use Google Scholar, or I want to use this and that. Now, these are not all the biasness, some of the biases, and why you need to control. I will speak about why we need to control this towards the tail end. But here are some of the biasness. Database biases. This is where you are inclined to a particular publishing house. In the health sector, most of us, we may tend to zero in on PubMed or WHO. If I don't see WHO, I tend to say you haven't done any. But there are other publications outside WHO. There are other publications or databases outside PubMed. In fact, we have so much new information from Asia that it is said that 50% of those materials we are not likely to get or to read them because we are so biased to European and American databases such as PubMed, Medline. You can talk about IMF or WHO. Those are authoritative. You look at the UN. Everybody's just looking at the UN. I'm looking at the UN. So you're at a particular, your interest is in a particular inclination. That's the database biasness. Publication biasness. This is where you are interested in certain journal only. You select journals. For example, a journal that I would select is that I would always go and look at the Harvard Business Review. Me, I'm looking for only articles that appear in Harvard Business Review. So I'm already biased. What if it is coming from the University of Accra or the University of Nairobi, Makerere University? Does it mean that I can't look at publications that are in-house? Those journals that are published by these prestigious institutions of learning? We are looking at the English language bias. So what happens to those publications that are done in Portuguese that have not been interpreted? So and very soon we'll have Kiswahili. What about those publications that are done in Arabic? So there is a language biasness. Thank God for AI. Now AI is able to translate back and forth. So it has minimized the fact that if it's not in an English publication, I will not read. Now I will be able to read. Citation biasness occurs when studies are with significant positive results. All right? So that you want your studies to be consistent. So when you appraise that, please take note that there's also reporting biasness. We have talked about selection. There's now reporting biasness. That is interpretation. However, there are scientific methods of identifying whether the articles that you have are biased or not. On Wednesday, you will learn more of these scientific methods or the graphical methods and other statistical tests that are going to be, that can be used to identify whether a study is biased or not. Allow me to pick the first one. Here is a graphical statistical output that can help us tell whether a study is biased or not. The most important thing is that in this graphic method, you should get a funnel, an inverted funnel, and you can see the very first one, a funnel that is in upside down. So you find that your studies, based on the samples, they will tend to concentrate and make a letter V, which is upside down. But the bottom one is a biased funnel. You'll find some studies are either inclined more to the left or more to the right. That is critical to take note of that, the funnel plot. But I must say this, that the funnel plot is also, and you'll be taught this on I think Wednesday, is that it can be more inclined and it is affected by small studies. Small studies, 10 cases, most of the time less than 20. Anything less than 20 will affect the funnel plot. So allow me to go to the last one. Then how do we then critically appraise? Allow me to introduce to this tool. I will increase just 1 minute. Let me increase this to 15. I hope it will not disappear. And then I sharpen this. So when you are doing critical appraisal, I like there are methods. There is one that is called CASP, critical appraisal for systematic publications, CASP, and there is Newcastle. I love the Newcastle Ottawa for critically appraising uh, for critically appraising each article. All right. So this one, it allows you to score a maximum of 9 points based on selection. And that one gives you 4 stars. Comparability gives you 2 stars. Outcome, 3 stars. So the emphasis is on selection and outcome. And the beautiful thing is that as you go right at the bottom, number 4, maximum 2 stars. When you go right at the bottom, it gives you, once you add them all, it gives you a mark. There's a scale. All right. So for case control and others, there's a scale. And this scale tells you how good each paper is. So if a paper scores 9 out of 10 points, that is a very good paper. If the paper scores 78, they are good. Not very strong, but they are good. 5 to 6, those are borderlines. And then studies that are 0 to 4 are weak papers. So how do you do it? You can do it 2 people or 3. You take each paper and you read. Once you read, it starts scoring. You have read through the full publication. And the first question is, for the publication you are reading, how representative is the sample? So you make a judgment. So the star, when you read, you choose between A, B, and C. Where there is a star, you give the full marks. Remember, the maximum marks you can give is 4 for selection. So you give the maximum. Yes, you give the maximum 1 mark. So if the answer is A or B, any of them is 1 mark. If you don't find that, you give it 0. Then you go to the sample size. Did the authors have a statement that justifies the sample size? If the answer is yes, you give a mark. It is not justified, you give a 0. Look at non-respondent. Give a mark if the answer is A, and give 0 and 0 if the answer is the response or no description. Assessment of risk. And then you are going to count the number of points. It's 1 mark per each question. Then we go to comparability. This is now on the results section. Confounders, you give a mark where any of those. Look at the outcome. If it's laboratory, if it is statistical, and then you add all those points, and then you score them against this matrix, the rubric, this rubric that you have there. So it will be interesting to see how each publication moves along each of the scales. There is another one here. This one is for case controls. The first one was for cross-sectional. The first one is for cross-sectional studies. The second one is for case control. And it also has its quality rating. If you use this tool, you will have controlled for publication biasness, and you have also controlled for quality. The speakers in the coming days are going to talk about literally abstracting. Now that you have identified your 4 papers, your 10 papers, you have your 15 papers, what is the next step? Remember, data abstraction ends. Oh, this is the part I was saying that this one we are going to forget. We are going to replace the whole of this with this Ottawa. The Newcastle Ottawa will replace this part. So already you have done your data abstraction. Once you reach this point, I'm going to give it to my third speaker, who will now take you through those other details of now extracting step by step. Allow me to end there. And I don't know how many minutes I have to take your questions. I am done with this short, brief intro. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. It's been insightful presentation. So I think for some time, quickly we can look through the charts, then we take some few questions. Let me see. So we have some questions in the chat. Take them.
Oh, yes. I will start with Sandra because I think the other one we had done in. Oh, they are going back. Okay. Please, can we get the recording? Okay, the recording you will have.
Yes, share with them.
Yeah, okay. The next one is asking, Evangeline, should we then exclude the small studies? The answer is no. Do not include the small studies. You need almost every study. And when you're working on systematic review, please work as a group so that you're able to make a concise decision, a critical decision, what to include and what to exclude. Small studies are good because sometimes the issue that you're looking at is really an emerging issue. For example, when you look at the LGBTQ issues in secondary schools, among secondary school boarding, then those studies are few and they are meant to be small because even the nature of the discussion is very sensitive. So it is good to in level of biasness, reporting biasness, for they may tend to report selected findings and drop out the others. That's a problem with small studies. It is the reporting biasness. Oh, my cursor is moving very fast. I think sharing the recording, that's okay. Thank you. Somebody is asking some concerns as my colleagues. We hope the Excel sheet, okay. Those will be shared. Yes, I've already shared them with the our chair and including the rubric. At the bottom of the Newcastle, you have that rubric. You already have it there. Includes R. You can use R. You can use starter. You will be taught on, I think, Wednesday, how to use some of these tools. So the starter, there's R. They will even plot for you the various funnel plots. But now in qualitative, remember in qualitative research, they do what we use, they use what we call non-probabilistic methods. Non-probabilistic. Quantitative uses probabilistic methods, which is the basis for statistics. That's the difference. Meta-analysis is largely based on probabilistic statistics, correlations, associations, and data. In qualitative, you are doing more thematic analysis. And therefore, the issue here is therefore to find out in this qualitative analysis, is there consistency in the reporting the findings of the issue at hand? Is it consistent? Are the issues consistent without necessarily putting them through chi-square or correlations? So this is thematic analysis or thematic building, and the whole idea is this: at the end of your qualitative, you want to come and generate like a hypothesis at the end of it all. So you're not doing any hypothesis testing, but you're building a hypothesis by making a case. That is the big difference. I hope that can you please try and go over the funnel plot? I got stripped off. Okay, just very quickly because of time. I know maybe the next presenter is maybe around the corner. If you look at this, I put you on any very. Let me take it from here. There are two statistical methods for identifying publication biasness. The graphical, which is the funnel plot, asymmetry, which should be the shape of a funnel inverted upside down. And then there are certain statistical tests like the eager test and the Rosenthal fail-safe and test. You'll be taught this when you do startup. Now, the first graph right at the top shows you the funnel plots. And that is what we are calling unbiased because they tend to cluster like a bell shape. That's why it's a funnel upside down. So those studies are close. But when you look at the bottom one, those studies seems to be, they tend towards the right-hand side. They are skewed to the right hand. Sometimes they could be skewed to the left. So you don't get that asymmetry. That is the difference. But there are other tests. You do the confirmatory test using the Egan and other statistical tests that have been listed. Okay. That was successful. English language, but okay. If a paper is done English medium, is it hard? Let me say this. There are very many studies that are in Chinese, that are in Spanish and Portuguese. The biasness we have, for example, from the Anglo-speaking countries, we may tend to focus on those publications of by the English authors, English-speaking authors, because they're easy to read and they make our work easier. But when you get a Spanish paper, sometimes it's difficult for Anglophone speakers to really go around and be able to understand what the Chinese, is saying. So this is purely an issue of language biasness. But I have put a note there and I've said, these days we have what we call artificial intelligence, AI, and they are able to interpret or translate non-English articles to English. So even if you get one in Arabic, you can actually turn it into English using some of the many softwares, the AI softwares. There are about 5 of them. 5 AI softwares that can translate a whole paper. Okay, AI. Okay, first of all, Emmanuel is asking, is this method of checking bias applicable with systematic in management science? The answer is yes. I am a student of management science, and some of the journals that we have, for example, we are I was looking at strategic alliances and delivery of projects in project management. And you can see studies from Europe has a lot of their population could be industries or farms. They could have measurements, performance measurements that are either financial, non-financial, that includes even issues of time series and related. So it's a back and forth translation, back and forth. So it is possible. Oh, all right. AI, there's Ryan. Ryan is there. There's a tool for Ryan, but I'm going to let the speaker for, I think, Wednesday to take you through some of the tools. Oh, what appraisal score should an article get to be included? As long as it's not a poor score. Anything that is poor or below, that means it's a very weak paper. All right, it's a very weak paper, so maybe that one could be dropped. From my experience so far, we only had one that was very poor, but it was because it was done by that study. Although it was a topic of our interest, but as we went through, it was at the University of Addis Ababa. So as we were going through, we realized that is a bachelor student who was looking on the strength of materials used for biomedical engineering. So it was a bit weak because of the methodologies and the materials strength. The student was testing the strength of materials to see whether they can be included in development of forceps for removing skin, dead skins. And therefore, the method described was very weak. We dropped, that's what we dropped. So as long as any team feels, Chair, this is very interesting. Can I go over issues of how to formulate? It's quite a lot. It's quite a lot.
Yes, I think because how the questions are coming, we need to skip some of them. I'm sure later on they can send in or they'll put it on the page as the facilitators also be added to the page and they can be attending to them on the WhatsApp.
Okay. Maybe what we could also do is that probably if you find time on Wednesday or Thursday, if there's time, I can actually make myself available.
That's great.
We do two things.
Okay.
We can do how to set a research question.
Okay.
And we can also do the scoring. And the scoring.
Okay. This is great.
Yes.
So I will stay in touch and we will see how possible that is.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm so grateful. Thank you, participants.
So thank you very much. So to anyone that has questions, unfortunately, because of time, we'll be able to address more questions. But as I said, with time, we will know how to answer your questions. And some of your questions will be answered as we proceed with the subsequent presentations.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored.
Yes, thank you very much for your time and even for the wonderful presentation you've given us this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you're.
Okay.